There wasn't a lot going on in open source design. Did y'all notice anything else, or did we want to round off there? I mean, we can go into the really political thing about the budget, but that's in no way open source, so we don't need to be going into that unless we want to.
We don't.
Jordan, do you have... Go ahead.
I don't know. If we don't have anything to talk about, I could say a subject.
Go ahead, bring one up.
Well, we haven't really talked about distros that much. And I know you talk about it, you did reviews on them. But as far as, alternative Ubuntu distros, and I know how Jordan feels about this, and we all feel pretty similar on that subject. But, Pinguy and Zorin. First of all, have you tried them? The show that sucks, have you?
I haven't actually tried them.
Any of them? Because if we haven't, then we don't have to talk about it. How about you, Jordan? You've tried Pinguy.
I have tried Pinguy. I have not tried Zorin. I think I looked at it a very long time ago, but in my experience with it, it looked like Ubuntu with a theme switcher to make it look like Windows. I didn't, as far as the feature list and everything, it didn't seem like it had much of anything else.
That was why I didn't really have any interest in trying it, because it seemed like it was coming from the camp of what's wrong with Linux is it isn't Windows. And I'm like, that's not what's wrong with Linux.
Well, and there are a lot of those Ubuntu-based distros that are, let's take Ubuntu, package my set of applications on it, or my set of 5 people's applications on it, and we'll call it a new distro, and make a whole giant ISO out of it that's 4 gigs in size that you have to download, and we'll claim that we're making a whole new distro, and a lot of times it's just that. It's Ubuntu plus some stuff that really could have easily been a meta package, where you install Ubuntu from the default CD that everybody's got, or everybody who uses Ubuntu has, and then run this update from a PPA, and you get all these extra apps that this person has decided that you need.
Yeah.
Well, and like James...
I mean, people like to have the feeling of having their own distro and people using, that's why they do that, of course. The same reason why someone would make their own application instead of just improving a different one. I mean, it's, you like the idea that people are using your application. I've tried both. Zorin, I'm definitely not impressed with. They're both kind of buggy. As with Pinguy, for you, Conky shut off and a few things went weird. Same with me when I was using it. Zorin also had weird things happen to it. I don't like how Zorin looks and works, and it doesn't look like there's a lot put into it. Pinguy looks a lot more refined, and I actually kind of like the setup. I think it's actually kind of nice, and I could see how it could actually help a workflow having, I could see that workflow working. Zorin, it just looks like Windows. It doesn't really work like Windows, and it's kind of buggy.
Well,
and Pinguy is actually gaining a lot of traction.
Huh?
Pinguy is actually gaining a lot of traction. It's, I think Pinguy was in my IRC channel earlier, and he said something about being number 7 on the distro watch list for this week, and he's within the top 50 for the last so many months.
Well,
and it does have something to it, but at the end of the day, it is still Ubuntu designed the way that a couple of people have decided it should be.
It is, and he's made a few of his applications, but it's not the same as
here's the thing.
I at least like Pinguy. I don't really.
Well, here's the thing. I'm really hesitant to stomp down on projects like this because there are a number of hallmark distros, to name 2, Mint and PC Linux OS, that started out largely that way. They basically, rather than start from scratch, they built on somebody else. They were basically just a retheming and some, like, 1 or 2 custom apps, but there's no reason those apps couldn't have been added to the other distro. But it's one of those things, you don't build a mountain overnight. In the fullness of time, it may fully fork off. And really, that is exactly what Canonical wants, as you've said many times. They just want everybody to be an Ubuntu-based distro, and to varying degrees of difference. But it's a gray line between whether or not the projects are ever going to evolve into that, or whether they're really something that should just be, pushing upstream because they're never really going to do a fork to really be a true fork.
Jordan, can I ask you if you still think that? Do you still think that Mint is, an Ubuntu, themed distro in the same way that Pinguy or Zorin would be?
In some ways, it is Ubuntu Plus stuff for the default distribution, but at the same time, they are developing their own applications, maintaining their own repositories. They are taking the steps to be not just Ubuntu Plus a few things, Ubuntu Plus a lot of things, really, a lot of custom things. And Pinguy is actually starting to take that step as well. He created at least one application for this latest version. It's a comp key management tool, but it's, like I said, it's one step.
Right.
So you would still put Mint in like the kind of gray area where it's not really its own distro yet. It's getting there, and it definitely deserves. You could see
a large part of what
there,
is pushing Mint in that direction of its own distro is that they're starting to branch away from Ubuntu on all of their derivatives. Which ones is it? The XFCE, I think Fluxbox, and the LMDE at least are all Debian based now, which is still not their own distro. It's still based off something else. But for the most part, distros do just base off other distros. But I think that showing that they can base it off of Debian and have at least some modicum of success with it. Am I frozen?
Alright.
My camera froze.
Your camera froze.
I think that is its own distro, and that at some point everything's pretty based off another thing. But
well, no, see, that's the thing. That's one of the benefits of open source. There's no reason to go back and reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. It's at the end of the day, I think all of them are loosely based on each other. It's like I'm the unless you're Linus, and even then, then oh God, I can't remember his name right now. Because the purist will say it isn't Linux, it's GNU Linux. I can't remember his name.
If you get way far back, I mean, both Debian and Slack were based on SLS.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's the purists who will go, this is based on that, which is based on that, which is based on that, on that, on that, on that, and that, and these are really the only people who's it's not. But this is how open source develops. The
reason I call Mint its own distro is because there's actually people working full time on Mint who are actually getting paid, which is only 2. But I mean, we call GIMP a real thing, and there's only 2 people working on that. 1.5, they said. But yeah, but the fact that Mint now makes enough to pay 2 full salaries is pretty cool.
Well, no, and I
can actually have support. They can change their distros. They don't have to do everything that Ubuntu has and stay compatible. They could do their own things a few ways. So that's why I think that because they actually do have some ability to do their own thing. They're not constrained because they're so reliant on Ubuntu. That's why I think that it does deserve to have a name Mint rather than be a meta package Mint.
Well, and at the end of the day, the only reason this it's both bad and good at the same time that we have pseudo distros based on other distros. It's good in that, it's open source being open source. It's trying new things. It's things that may grow up into full-grown things or may fizzle out and get merged back into the whole, survival of the fittest. The good things will get popular and grow and continue to develop, and the other things, not so much. I think at one point we had what was it? Somebody said a Hannah Montana distro or something, there was really no reason for that, and I think it's an all but dead project at this point. But on the other hand, it can be confusing to the end user who is coming from the Windows or OS X mindset of, a different OS means an entirely different set of rules. I would consider all of them a different OS because there's even one pack difference, it is a different default operating system. Even if you can add this pack over here and so on and so forth, you know, the out-of-the-box default experience is different. It's different enough that, you know, it's not identical. But one of the advantages of Linux is just because we have dozens, in some cases, depending how you count, thousands of OSs, doesn't mean you largely can't use the same tools on all of them. And that's a mindset that's kind of hard to convey to the uninformed end user. It's one of those things open source has desperately been trying to succeed at for years and hasn't quite managed to get it just right yet. And I'm not sure how you would ever really fix that problem, so Grandma can understand it doesn't matter if I'm running blah, 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 or blah. I can probably still get blah, 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 and blah. Or am I trying to oversimplify that in y'all's opinion? And then there was silence and nobody said nothing.
I'm reading the history of Red Hat to see where that started, because I know that Debian and Slackware started from SLS. It seems that before Red Hat was a distro, it was just a package manager.
Yeah, Red Hat's responsible for those lovely RPMs.
Well, no, I know they're responsible for it, but as in there was a Red Hat packagement system, which wasn't RPM at the time, it was RPP, and that actually came before Red Hat was a distro, before they just provided a package management system. Later, they became a distro. Rather than Debian, Deb was created for the distro. It seems that it was a package management system before it was a distro. I'll have to read more about it, but it's interesting.
No, and on that note, do you think we'll ever give up on, you know, this whole RPM and .dev and just go back to binaries?
What are you talking about? RPM and .dev often do contain binaries.
I know that, but as far as I know, there isn't a good, easy way to download an RPM and install it in a distro that runs the Debian package manager or vice versa.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, back to a more universal, you know, this is a binary for all Linux, you know, regardless. Do you think...
There are a lot of apps that are doing that.
There are a lot of apps that are doing that, but it's...
Not whole distros that are doing it.
Yeah.
Well, most... I don't understand what you mean. I mean, the package management system is not to exactly install it. I mean, all it does is the package management system, what it's doing, I mean, since the binary, as you say, for the most part, a binary for Linux will also work on other Linuxes if someone follows certain standards, and there's very few, you know, things that people can code in that's distro specific. But the package manager like .dev or RPM doesn't really handle, you know, making it work on it. What it handles is installing it and making it easy to remove and uninstall, and placing it in the right place, and putting it on the menus, and integrating it with the rest of the system. A binary can't really do that.
No, I suppose I should rephrase that question. Do you think we're ever going to get a compatibility layer that will allow Debian to use RPMs and RPM-based distros to use Debian files, so we can, you know, play nice with each other? Just
for that, they would have to develop together. I mean, there is...
We do have aliens who convert RPMs to devs,
yeah.
I've had mixed results with that personally. I don't know about y'all.
Well, that's part of the reason why there may not be a compatibility layer in the works. Because there are a lot of distros that are based on one or the other are not just the packaging designed differently, but like where the libraries are located and where drivers are placed and things like that are just different. So taking it from one type of distro to another may just not work correctly.
Yeah, well, I know. It's like
although I think that if we were going to choose one, I think that we should use arches. They seem more. It seems simpler.
Which one does
we can understand what like a package build is. I don't know that much about building devs, even though I've tried a few times. Plus, I love the AUR. I think that's the best thing about Arch.
Well, Well, and see, that brings up an interesting question. And at some point, one of these three is going to become the predominant one.
And as I understand, Pac-Man has already been put on other distros.
Yeah, I know that, but what I'm getting at is, this is me showing a little bit of my ignorance, but how easy is it for a distro to just wake up one morning and go, crap, we backed the wrong horse. We're going to switch everything over to this one. You know, I don't think that's a flick a switch change. I'm not even sure you could implement. Could you implement that in a rolling distro where you could just roll that update, or would that basically be I'm sorry, you have to start over now?
Depending on the severity of the switch, that could be a significant change, or it could be a really minor one. If it's changing from like Ubuntu to Debian, that's minor. I think it would be doable.
But like from Deb to RPM, or from RPM to Art, or
Yeah. Anything's possible, but honestly, you would probably, the best that could be done if we're going to transfer distro over is back up your huge list of software and then just start over and reinstall it. I mean, it could potentially be done, but there's no way.
Where that gets to be a problem is for the distros that have created custom to their distro, and part of what makes the distro is certain control or management system or apps that have been created for that distro. And that's one of the main reasons to use that, because then they'd have to basically redo them in that other thing. That's and like you're saying, in some cases, this is the guy sitting, this is the one guy. He's like, I can see whenever one of these wins, and it's inevitable. At some point, one of them will win. It may not be. It may not be the best one. We all have the one we'd like to win.
I mean, RPM and .dev have both been around for about the same amount of time, and they're still both going strong.
So you think this utopian world I'm dreaming of, where they'll all get along nice with each other, is just never going to happen? We're always going to have the, we have two strong ones, a newcomer, and 5 years from now we'll have 7 instead of 3.
I think that we'll still have 3. They won't necessarily be the same 3. I mean, we may have 4, we may have 2, but I don't. It's enough as the ecosystem can support. I mean, Deb is a different system than RPM. They both do the same thing on the front end, but on the back end, of course, I've never looked at the source code. I've never programmed my own package manager, but one would assume that the back ends work in a much, much different way.
I know enough to know they do, but the true pros and cons of each one, unfortunately, this is one of the areas that if you're not if you're not a developer and you're not actually, packaging things and so on and so forth, you're kind of having to take other people's arguments on face value. And I have found in all the research I've done in this, there's quite a bit of open source FUD going on there, where it's just, this one's best because I said so, because it's the one I use.
But I mean, if you look at this is actually interesting that I read Red Hat history, because it comes up to be relevant. Red Hat, as I said, was originally a package manager before it was a distro. So at least this is what the Fedora project Red Hat history website says. So I think that's pretty accurate. Anyway, so it was a package manager before it was a distro, and then they built a distro around that package manager. So think of how fundamental a package manager must be for a distro, that the package manager was so important that you build a distro around a package manager.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons though.
So it must be a very big part of the distro that if you wanted to switch, if you wanted there to be one system of package management, you would pretty much have to have everything be based off one distro. I prefer Debian, but.
Well, no, and that is actually something that that has come up in that thing, like what you're talking about, because it was done the other way around with Debian. there's people who are harsh on the deb package thing because they're like, this was created deliberately to fraction us and to splinter us. You know, there was no reason they couldn't use that. They just chose not to make it hard on everyone and make you have to. And I'm like, and I'm not sure there was really malice there, but I can see the argument. You know, it's just
well, no, I mean, when Debian created their own package management system, there were a lot of problems with the RPM one. You know, the old dependency hell in that. I believe Red Hat packages didn't satisfy their own dependencies, so that's why Deb was made. I mean, now it's all fragmented, and now RPM has fixed their dependency problem, but I believe that's why it was.
Well, no, and the argument those purists make is, you know, instead of going off and doing their whole thing, they should have helped RPM fix it. You know, rather than splintering it and holding up. You know, your purists on all sides they kind of come out of left field at you when it comes to some of that stuff. It's not that their arguments are invalid. It's just try and see the other side for a moment. It's like, I don't know what your 2 cents on that is, Jordan.
Well,
you had something to say.
As far as I understand it, there is the Linux standard base, which is considered to be RPM based. I like the idea of having choice. I don't like the idea that it's making it more difficult for software vendors to put software out there. But if the humble indie bundle has taught us anything, it's you can put out an executable binary that will work across whatever distro you want. So it really doesn't matter how you package it. Let the distros package it. As far as I don't foresee there ever being any sort of unification because just like the move to Unity and GNOME 3, people hate the lack of customization, people hate the lack of choice. So if you put it all into one package management system, the people who are making the packages, a lot of them would say, I hate this, I want to do it my own way. If you said you can't do it your own way, Linux doesn't support it anymore, there would be a lot of people that would either make their own way or they would leave.
Well, no, and see, that right there pretty much does sum it up. And James, you need to say what you're going to say in a second. But this is one of those times where I think open source really and free software really does stick its foot in its mouth, because it's like, what's wrong with choice is that you chose. And I'm like, hi pot, me kettle. You know, they didn't choose what you wanted, but they made a choice. You know, that's kind of the whole idea behind open source. You know, anyways, what were you saying a second ago, James?
So, as far as packaging for things for Linux, it's not like you have to learn a totally new system. When I was trying to learn how to make my own .deb, I was searching, you know, on Google, and one of the suggestions they had was to look at an RPM guide, because it's actually very similar, and obviously probably because, you know, not RPM, but RPP, which was the before RPM packages existed before .debs, they probably made it just a different system internally.
Out of curiosity, do you know what RPP stood for? Because RPM is Red Hat Package Manager. What would RPP be?
It had it, and I just forgot. Let me look at it. But anyway, I'll type while I talk.
Okay.
It's actually very similar to package something as a .deb as to package it as an RPM. I mean, they're different in how they handle those packages, but to actually make your software work for them, it's actually, you don't have to learn a whole different system. They're all very similar. And as I looked at it when I was learning on it, and I've seen it, Arch's Way is also pretty similar too. So, it's not like the difference between creating an exe, which isn't exactly a package, and but whatever difference is.
Well, ultimately,
it's
I would.
It's not as big of a deal as one might think for a developer to create one for RPM and .deb.
Where it gets to be a problem is with the dirty little thing that we like to ignore in the open source community, and that is, it's incredibly easy when we all have the source code and we have the source things, and the individual distros can repackage it themselves. When we're dealing with people who are distributing proprietary stuff where they won't give us the source, and they have to package it themselves, then it becomes a, well, we're not necessarily going to package it for everything, and you're not going to get the source code so you can fix it yourself.
Yeah. RPP. Oh my goodness, it doesn't actually say.
It's like I'm trying to think what the other P would be. It's obviously package, but packager, propagator. We have a missing P.
Red Hat package processor, I'm guessing. I don't.
Anybody who knows what the other P stands for, please tell us, because this is going to bug me all week.
Yeah. Put it in the comment sections below. I'm interested too. I have no idea what RPP stands for.
Okay then.
Anyway, but yeah, that does make a point in that people might be only package it for one thing.
Well, no, and like, I'm not a purist. I honestly would like to see a world where proprietary and open source play nice with each other. I prefer open source. I understand there's some people who are never going to see the benefits of open source. That doesn't mean they should be completely cut off and shunned and say, you suck! It's like, no, they're different.
But there's not really an easy way to fix this. It's, again, even if we had one package manager, it wouldn't necessarily mean that any package for that package manager would work across all distros. The same way that any package for Debian does not necessarily work on Ubuntu because they're not binary compatible. So even if you had one package manager, that could almost be worse because it would be confusing.
Yeah, I guess.
If you had one package manager that worked one way, you'd have one distro, and
which is
then
defeats
the whole proprietary OS.
Which defeats the okay. Then I suppose what we're really after here then is not a universal package manager, because we don't want just one distro. We like the fact that there are many and they're consigned. What we're trying to think of is a way that companies that are never going to be open source can distribute their software to Linux in a way that they don't have to work too much harder. You know, they can distribute one thing that allows them to still be proprietary and closed like they want to for some insane reason, but it will there'll be enough hooks that the distros can fix it themselves without actually having access to the source. I'm not sure how that would almost be an entirely new package management system. Yes, proprietary center thing that has hook-ins that distros can self-adjust for.
There's only, I could see, 3 solutions. One of them doesn't really count. The one that doesn't count is that one distro rises up and that it's the big Linux.
And that's what I'm definitely afraid of, which is why I consider this a problem. It needs to be solved so that doesn't happen.
And the second one is similar to the first, but it's not as bad as that. All distros eventually become based on one distro.
Just as bad.
Not just as bad.
Bad enough.
It would just mean that they would all use the same binary compatibility. They would all use the same package manager. Anyway, and the third one would be that, much like Wine, Linux people would start implementing an emulation layer for other distros. Emulate, you know, just like Wine, I believe, can.
But see, that is the solution I keep coming back to. Some kind of an emulation or virtual machine layer designed specifically for these things.
You wouldn't want a virtual machine, but just something that would, just a compatibility layer. You know, it's not. Yeah. Virtual machine obviously would be slow, but just something that'll, you know, translate, you know, Debian made the choice to do this with this system call or whatever, and then, as I understand it, and then Red Hat made the choice to do this with this system call, or disable this for security, but Debian enabled it for to help users out.
So basically, you want to
translate that.
basically you want a frame. Basically, you're suggesting a framework that is entirely open source, so all the distros can implement it like they want to, but it has an agreed upon standard and API calls. That's okay.
Just something to translate those API calls to the separate distros, like as I understand, Wine does.
Well, Wine's trying to
program,
Wine's trying to emulate the Windows calls as best it can without infringing.
Yeah, but not in a virtual machine type of way.
Well, no, it's like that's one of the problems with Wine. Even though you can make many Windows applications run on Wine, it's still not a true native application and doesn't. And
I don't see how it could be, but I think that it'll actually be. It won't be. I mean, the difference is that the distros make, it's not the same as the difference between Windows and Linux. So you could probably using this emulation layer, Wine, let's just call it Rhine, to run a web package on Ubuntu. I wouldn't be surprised if it did look completely native, because it's not that different. They both use the same, well, at least they used to, both use GNOME, and they both use the same, as apart from Windows, who uses different everything. They both use the same core applications. Most of the system calls are the same. So with that, it wouldn't be that big of a difference, but I don't know. I don't think that it's that big of a deal. Companies already package for Android, iPhone, Windows, Mac.
Yet somehow they bitch out the wazoo for packaging for Linux. Don't understand why, but they do. and on that, do we want to, I guess, tail off, or do you have something else to say, Jordan? Or
no, I'm good. I've got a long day tomorrow of driving.
Oh, I found it.
Honestly, it would probably work if they just packaged it for .deb and .rpm. I mean, for the most part, Deb packages work on Ubuntu, so it's really not that much to do.
I know it's not, but you should hear the excuses that comes out of these people. Anyways,
alright.
Hopefully y'all got. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that, and on that, if anybody has a suggestion on that particular topic, you post that too. Okay.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Remember, what does RPP mean?
Yes. What does RPP mean? I really do want to know if somebody remembers. All right. Bye.